بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله الذي جعل لكم الليل لتسكنوا فيه والنهار مبصرا إن الله لذو فضل على الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يشكرون. ذلكم الله ربكم خالق كل شيء لا إله إلا هو فأنى تؤفكون. كذلك يؤفك الذين كانوا بآيات الله يجحدون. الله الذي جعل لكم الأرض قرارا والسماء بناء وصوركم فأحسن صوركم ورزقكم من الطيبات. ذلكم الله ربكم فتبارك الله رب العالمين. هو الحي لا إله إلا هو فادعوه مخلصين له الدين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. قل إني نهيت أن أعبد الذين تدعون من دون الله لما جاءني البينات من ربي وأمرت أن أسلم لرب العالمين. صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you, Ibrahim, for that recitation. Well, our next guest this evening is Osman Karolia. He's Head of Community Engagement at Unity Grammar. Osman has been a member of the Principals Committee of the Independent Education Union and one of the original founders of the Islamic Schools Association of Australia, where he served as both Secretary and Vice President. Osman coordinates charity and service learning projects at Unity Grammar, including food drives for refugees and families in need, sleeping bag drives to the homeless, and interfaith intercultural experiences. And if that's not enough, He's also a keen sportsman and coach of school teams. Osman, welcome to this Ramadan conversation. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, John. Lovely to be on your program.
Osman, I'm not sure that if I was following your regimen, I'd be able to survive getting back to school. The holidays must need to be a special time of relief for you.
Look,
Look,
it was it was a particularly different type of a holiday because everyone was just indoors, and I think
yeah.
all of us in schools, Nazan, I'm sure you can appreciate this, are really just longing for the day for our students to come back. I mean, schools are meant to be full of the laughter, the noise, the chatter of young people being young people, and you can't replicate that. As much as we try, and we try so hard with the online learning platforms, we're about having schools with children, and the sooner we get back to face teaching, I think we'll all be much happier.
Nazan?
Yes, welcome, Osman.
Thank you, Nazan.
Just a question. You've been in the education system as a teacher, a deputy principal, a principal, and I believe you have a strong emphasis on values-based education. What are some of the activities that you have conducted at your schools based on values education? Could you just enlighten us on those?
Sure. So at Unity Grammar, we, like your school, are firmly of the view that a holistic education prepares children for a life beyond school. And as part of our values education, we look at the well-being of our local community and further communities, including communities abroad. We look at interaction with the elderly, the disabled. We also look at how we can better the environment. Within the school environment, when we're looking at our values program, it's about appreciating each other and also appreciating others. As part of appreciating others, we've got extensive contact, and we continue to grow the contact with students, young people, and children of diverse communities.
I understand that you've even reached internationally. That is, you worked with kids and your students in Cambodia.
As part of graduating from Unity Grammar, part of the experience is all our students who finished the HSC and our alumni, so those who finished at the school previously, can join a humanitarian trip with our school, with Unity Grammar, and our partners Relief to Cambodia. And the whole idea, John, is to get their hands dirty, keep them active. So it's an infrastructure sustainable development based project where they literally build water wells with their hands, literally repair buildings, put up homes, and it's not very glamorous, but build sanitation blocks, which means a clean way of people using the bathroom and the clean contamination of sewage, because waterborne diseases are such a problem in places like Cambodia. So it's about making a difference and leaving a legacy, because what those students build with their hands remains for many, many years after we leave Cambodia and return to Australia.
It seems you're picking up a theme that we touched on actually last night in the program, and Nazan, I might get your observation to this, that
Yes.
so much of the value of education these days teachers are finding comes through action. That is engagement, not just intellectual engagement, but real engagement
That's
with
right.
with the process.
Yes, absolutely. I think with what resonates with people, it is that that leaders walk the talk. That's very important. And seeing leaders, students active is very important. See them doing things is important, because that reflects what we stand for. Yeah.
And of
If I
course,
may,
carries over into your interest in sport. The active, you keep an active sporting life. Are you more than just a coach these days still?
look, these days I must admit that a lot of the sport is done by much younger, much more capable members of our school sporting department. I think I've just sort of watched and cheer from afar. But I have, over the years, in schools and out of schools, I've always find that sport is a medium by which people can connect. whether it be with other schools, whether it be with different communities. Sport almost had, or it still continues to have, an international currency. It's an international currency to bring people together over a physical activity, whether it's kicking a ball, whether it's running a race, whether it's swimming laps in a pool. It just brings people together. And one of the tragedies of COVID-19 is we'll miss the Olympic Games this year. We will be back, or hopefully they'll be back next year. But what a tremendous celebration for different people, regardless of where they are or what their belief or what their creed, coming together to celebrate our shared humanity over sporting events. If I can touch on what Nazan alluded to previously, we speak about evolution, and as part of evolution, we speak about we evolve as people, we evolve as individuals, we evolve as professionals. And if I may say so, as part of that evolution, education continues to evolve. Once upon a time, it was all about the raw mark a student attained, but now it's also about developing them as individuals. And as part of that development, I think sport and physical activity plays a very important role, as does the creative arts, in forging young lives. So sport resonates with me, but I think beyond entertainment and beyond the physical attributes, it's also a wonderful medium to bring people together.
And I also understand that you've been seen more than once pedaling a bicycle around the streets of the town.
Yes, cycling is something I got into by chance. I was recovering from a leg injury, had an Achilles injury many years ago. The doctor said, look, you can't run for a long time. I've got a great love of food, John. And I thought, that's not going to end too well. And I looked at him and said, well, doc, what do I do? He said, ride your bike. I said, I haven't ridden a bike since I was 10 years old. And the one bike we do have at home is in the garage. It was used to hang washing. So we got the dust off the bike, started cycling, and what started off as a social thing evolved into a cycling club, the Sydney Muslim Cyclists. We invite cycling clubs of different communities from all over Sydney, and occasionally from afar, to cycle with us. Occasionally we've had people join the cycling group, and we've given them a tour of places like Lakemba Mosque, and we ride to raise funds for local hospitals. We raise funds for local people who are in need, whether it be advocating for refugees or whether it be people with a disability. And occasionally we raise money for communities abroad. So we're cycling, we're having a great time, but we're also trying to do some good. Of particular concern or particular interest to us was supporting MFs. So we cycle for those who can't because they've got MFs. And we've also raised substantial amounts for regional New South Wales. As keen cyclists, we enjoy going on road trips. A lot of those road trips are down the Riverina, particularly at a place called Tumut, where we go in a group. About 150 to 200 of the locals now join us. And with the money that we are able to raise through a optional donation, it's been enough to fund a number of much needed equipment for the local hospital down over there in Tumut.
That's fantastic. Now, I understand you've got some wider interests as well. You went with the Affinity Foundation and the Melbourne Catholic Archdiocese on a joint study tour to Istanbul and the Vatican a few years ago. What drew you into that?
You know, we always have to demonstrate through action what it is that we plan to achieve. And the opportunity for leaders of the Islamic community and those of the Catholic faith to travel together, I thought was a very unique opportunity. The opportunity to travel to a place such as the Vatican in Rome, where there's an audience with the Pope, I thought was something which I would benefit from and be able to share with the school I was at that particular time. So what drew me onto that was almost a need to connect with others in a meaningful way. And travel is a great way for people to really get to know each other and get to have shared experiences. And you really learn so much about other cultures, not by reading a book or by watching a documentary, but by physically appreciating what they offer by visiting them. And there was much that I gained from the trip to Istanbul, certainly to Rome and to Assisi. One of the things was the tremendous connection St. Francis had with the Muslim world. And I was able to share that with our students, that he had actually traveled to Egypt and started a conversation with the Sultan at the time. And that conversation led to much bloodshed being avoided. And it also allowed the St. Francis himself to take some of those teachings back to Assisi and share them with his followers. So that was a very early example of interfaith dialogue and interfaith experiences which led to good. And I thought it was a tremendous inspiration for me to also try and do my little bit wherever I can.
Yeah, you're interested in two areas which people emphasise as being centres of value. One is the physical activity of sport, and the other is, as you've indicated, the sort of development of interreligious understanding. And a lot of people would say those two things don't connect, but you seem to be saying no, quite profoundly they do.
I think quite profoundly they do. Both resonate with young people, both have an audience. And you can connect those different audiences together to have a body of people who suddenly have got a common discussion point, a common point of interest in which to further develop their interpersonal relations and their communication with each other. It's also a lot of fun, so it's quite enjoyable as well.
Nazan, did you want to pick up on some of that? I see you nodding your head there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how we're going with time, but can I just ask about the you've had a lot of engagement with interfaith and intercultural programs with the wider society in Australia. How important do you think it's to teach and lead our young generation in these two areas of interfaith and intercultural engagement? Can you just delve into that a little bit for us?
Look, we have a responsibility, Nazan, particularly as educators, to ensure that we don't just role model respect and appreciation of others, but we also allow our children in our respective schools to participate in activities where that appreciation can be manifested. We have got a very small world because of the technology that's available to us. And as the world becomes smaller, it can also become a lot more confusing because everyone is in each other's faces. Now, the more conversations people of diverse backgrounds have with each other, it reduces the mystery, it reduces the fear, and it takes away sometimes unhealthy stereotypes. So I think the more experiences, not just students, mind you, even allowing our staff, our parent bodies, and wider members of our different school communities, even sponsors, to get involved in some of those activities, you're just widening your pool. And suddenly, it's not just schools talking to each other, but it's in entire communities who are sharing a conversation and sharing an experience. Unity Grammar and Amity College are working on a joint project at the moment called Recipes for Ramadan. And Jane Jeffs asked me to say hello. And we'll have staff and we'll have students from our different schools sharing traditional recipes. And those recipes will go online so that members of the community can try and not only enjoy those recipes, but share in the journey from where those recipes came from. So whether you use food, whether you use sport, whether it's the creative arts, it might even be a debate, it might be a public speaking competition. Any activity which puts people together is going to be something that's healthy, something that resonates with people, and something which is much needed. I think gone are the days where these things were all too difficult. We live in such an incredible age now. By Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whichever platform, you could literally have your students engaging with other students in different parts of Sydney or Australia or even the world. So the world is getting smaller, and rather than fear that, let's embrace that. And interfaith, intercultural activities are a wonderful platform to embrace this new technology for the better.
Well, Osman, you are in fact something of a global citizen yourself. You're from South Africa, a country that's also confronting an enormous impact from COVID. Is this one of those countries where perhaps our help will be needed? I mean, is it time for us to be looking to develop our international values as Australians?
International links increasingly, because of technology, easier routes of travel, it's almost inevitable that people will cross paths. So as a country, I think shares many similar values and experiences with South Africa. We play the same sports. We almost like much of the same types of foods. We are both countries from the Commonwealth Dominion. So there's a lot of shared culture and a lot of shared history between the two nations. And I think the two nations have already got quite a healthy respect for each other. Perhaps it's come from the world of sport, and there's increased opportunities, I feel, for the two countries to engage, to bring out better. So whether it be supporting people in South Africa to develop their education systems, their health systems, their legal systems, and similarly, people from South Africa have got so much to share in terms of their experience of diversity, their struggles with diversity, that we can learn a lot from their struggle, particularly in the post-apartheid era, of how important it is for diplomacy, how important it is for people to talk, and how important it is for people to listen to each other.
Osman, Karolia, thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight for this Ramadan conversation.
Oh, look, thanks for giving me the time. Thank you, Nazan. We're your neighbour. You're not too far. You're literally down the road from us, so we hope to have you over once all these restrictions are done. John, thank you so much for your time.
Hopefully.
I applaud what both of you do. Have a wonderful Ramadan. Ramadan Mubarak.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on this Ramadan conversation. And now, Nazan, it's time to introduce our final guest for this evening. Professor Mary Crock is Professor of Public Law at the University of Sydney. Mary's interests are in migration and refugee law, and they reflect her past involvement in advocacy work. She's been engaged in it for many years. Mary helped to establish and run the Victorian Immigration Advice and Rights Centre in Melbourne, now known as the Refugee and Immigration Law Centre. In a distinguished career, she's held leadership roles as chair of a number of migration law-related committees and served on the Executive Committee of the Refugee Council of Australia. She is head assessor of Australia's Specialist Accreditation Program for lawyers in the area of immigration law. Professor Mary Crock, welcome to this Ramadan conversation.
Good evening, John. Good evening, Nazan. I think Osman is a very hard act to follow. Very impressive man. But may I begin by saying Ramadan Mubarak to our listeners and to you. You've given me a very generous introduction there, John. I am a teacher, though, at the end of the day, and I responded so strongly to everything that Nazan and Osman were saying about how much they miss their students. Mine are big children. In fact, they'd be very angry if I called them children, but I miss them just as much. Very sad.
Mary, you've had a remarkably great career focused particularly on refugee and immigration. One of the significant challenges for Australia continues to be the area of how we accept new communities. We're very good at congratulating ourselves as one of the world's most successful multicultural societies, but when it comes down to the micro, do we deserve the reputation?
Look, I sometimes say that we have two faces. There's the face that we present to the people we have chosen to bring to this country, chosen to embrace, and in fact, more than 27% of Australians were either born overseas or have a parent born overseas. So we are literally a country made up of migrants. What some of us may not realise is that upwards of 15% of our workforce is made up of people who are migrants, and that includes the many foreign students, some of whom are in my classes, I should say, but temporary workers of all kinds. And then on top of that, we have the people who come to Australia, like virtually every country, everywhere in the world. People are on the move. There's never been a time in human history when there are more people displaced by war, famine, all sorts of disasters. And that translates into forced migrants who come to countries when they're not necessarily wanted. And I think we have real problems at the moment with two groups of people. Problematically for me, one of those, and the biggest group, are actually the people who are here as temporary migrants. And that includes our foreign students, because they are hurting badly. Virtually uniformly, they've lost their jobs. And so they come here with savings, but they expect to be able to support themselves. Students, for example, are allowed to work up to 20 hours a week to support their studies here. You take away that money, and you take away the family and other community support that they have because they're being forced to bunker down and wherever they are being accommodated. And they are really hurting. And I'm very, very worried about my students who just psychologically are struggling and financially as well. And I know that the university has taken a big hit with the loss of income, but the hit is also being felt in terms of how we can support the students who are here and to keep them going through their studies and to make sure that they survive and eventually thrive.
Yes, there seem to be two slogans which you hear much of during this period of stress. One is the one that we've adopted, we're all in this together, and the other one is you've got to draw the line somewhere. Those slogans tend to collide.
Yeah. Well, my personal view is that we are all in this together, because I'm not going to have a job if I don't have any students. And Australia's biggest export earner at the moment has been its foreign students. We have to look after them, and in particular the students from China. I think that the game the government is playing at the moment with saying, oh, let's get to the bottom of this pandemic outbreak, it's really, really not helpful. And, I just think that it's a global problem. It's a pandemic that affects everybody. We should realise that we are all in this together and respond accordingly. I should throw in there that the other group that are really, really struggling here are the asylum seekers, the people who are on temporary visas, who've been recognised as refugees, who are getting no income support whatsoever. And so there are literally millions of people in Australia who are falling through the very, very big cracks that are opening up.
Nazan, as an educator, a teacher, how do you respond to these? And perhaps you've got a question for Mary around some of these questions.
Sorry, can you just repeat?
Oh, I was just asking if you had a question you wanted to ask of Mary around these questions.
Oh, yes. Look, during times of, can I just ask Mary, during times of social stress, people tend to look for scapegoats. And this year has been particularly stressful with COVID, and prior to that, other events. What are the needed steps remaining, particularly for faith-based groups such as Affinity, do you think?
Look, I welcome the initiative that Affinity is showing, going online with its iftar conversations. There have been so many sadnesses this year in terms of things that we're missing out on. And I, for one, am really, really sorry to miss the iftar dinners that I've been involved in now for a number of years. And I think this is a time, it follows quite closely on the Christian meditative and reflective time of Lent that culminates in Easter. The two have actually come quite close together this year. And in both instances, it really underscores the need for us to create and to maintain community. And it's not easy to do. We've struggled even this evening with trying to make the technology work so that we can talk to each other. And we're finding that, as you, I'm sure, are finding with your school, that it's not easy. It is actually surprisingly stressful. I can't believe how tired I've been getting just giving classes each day. And I see the stress in my students as well. So
Yes.
I don't have any magic wand to wave other than we've got to start getting creative. I learned to bake bread. I've just made some herb bread tonight while I was waiting to come on here. The law school has set up a virtual choir, which I don't know that I'm going to be courageous enough to join that yet, because I feel like I've literally lost my voice through this pandemic. But I think if you can't eat together, you can share recipes. You can virtually eat together, which is really important.
Could I ask one final question, because we are getting near the end of the program, and this takes us to that wider sphere that's been part of your concern for many years. A few years ago, in 2014-15, I understand, you travelled to Turkey, which has deep associations with many of the members of Affinity, to assess the enormous burden of refugees being carried by that country from conflicts across the Middle East. Now COVID-19 is reaching into those camps. How serious is it, and what can we do?
What can we do? That's a really good question. It's having a huge impact all over the world. I am hearing reports that people are so worried about COVID-19 in the camps that they're actually going back to Syria. And that is a really big call, to go back to a totally war-torn country where people have fled in fear of their lives. And they are making the decision that they'd rather face the government forces than stay in the camps and face, because the problem is that the refugee communities within these camps are already very, very compromised. They haven't got enough food. They are lacking in shelter very often. But a lot of refugees actually carry some forms of disabilities. A study that was done of the people coming off the border into Turkey from Syria found that almost 30+% of those coming into the country were people with disabilities. Now, that was actually quite an interesting finding for us in our research, because if you actually ask the UN Refugee Agency, they grossly underestimate the number of people with disabilities because people don't present. They won't tell you this. So, huge problems. Can I just say that Turkey was a really impressive country. Of the 6 countries that we visited, like Jordan, they referred to the refugees in their countries as guests. They gave them access as far as they could to health, medical assistance, to schooling, although everywhere, because of the sheer numbers of people coming in, that everybody was overwhelmed. But I've got to say that the way that the Turkish society is set up with the villagers and the muhtars who look after everybody, they were very impressive, but dealing with huge, huge problems. We've got no idea here in Australia how other countries are coping with these burdens.
Something to remind us of our responsibilities this Ramadan. Mary Crock, that's an appropriate place, I think, to conclude this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Nazan, we've almost run out of time, but there's some fairly interesting
Yes.
points there, particularly for you as an educationalist.
Yes, definitely. I don't know. I what Mary said about her feeling for her students and the stressful the fact that they are feeling the stress of the COVID-19 and not being able to possibly come to Australia, or they may be stranded in China. We don't know, but we could see the fear in everyone's face, particularly even at school. Because we are confronted with the almost not every day, but the uncertainty. The uncertain times. I think that is very difficult for us to sort of accept. Today we had our staff development day, and where we are having to naturally to introduce new procedures, new programs, and everything. A lot of the things are new, and teachers, although teachers are supposed to be the most flexible, open to change, we find that a lot of the times teachers are the most rigid and are the most difficult to change. So, we are in this together, John, and we are all learning together. We're upskilling ourselves, learning the technologies that we need to know to be able to have quality teaching and learning in place in our remote learning environment. So,
well, yes,
we are in it together. Yes.
All our 3-year cyclical lesson plans are coming adrift.
Yes. Yes. We had, can I just say that I was just thinking about this whole year. At the start of the year, I think I jinxed myself. We had planned, as in primary, we had planned all our activities and excursions, and we had short-term goals in place, and we were really, determined to achieve those. And all of a sudden, COVID comes in and changes our whole life. Is turned upside down, and education is completely become something we've never seen before. Yes, but we will get over this.
Some of the challenges we're going to pick up in future episodes of these Ramadan Conversations, because that's what they're all about. We're all in this together. And thank you all at home or wherever you are. And we thank you for joining us and hope you'll join us for more of our conversations. Our next episode will be tomorrow. And if you wish to view this or any of the series of Ramadan Conversations, you can find them on the Affinity YouTube channel. Stay safe. Have a great Ramadan.
Thank you.